World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Now, I didn't realize this at the time I first made the upgrades for Protection Paladins, but I actually struggle with coming up with good upgrades for tanking specs. The main reason is I know that the active mitigation tools that tanks have are important, and finding ways to upgrade them properly is exactly the kind of thing that would make tanking players excited. But because I don't actually tank myself, I don't know how to upgrade them. And there's quite a few pitfalls when it comes to upgrading active mitigation, like making the active mitigation ability upgrade hideously overpowered, or making them powerful enough so that they're absolute must-haves in all situations, which would de facto mean there are less real customization options in the upgrade spread, or, of course, making the active mitigation upgrade ability useless or subpar compared to the baseline ability. You know, my ideal active mitigation upgrade is something that's more useful in some situations and less useful in others, so that real variety is there in the player's kits. I really need feedback to let me know whether I've done something good here, and even if it is good, that doesn't mean seasoned, experienced protection players won't come up with better ideas than I have. And I hope they do. If I receive any better ideas in my feedback, I want to swap them in and swap out my suboptimal ones in the next iteration. With all of that out of the way, let's go into my first iteration of Protection's upgrade spread. First, we have Shield of the Crusader, an upgrade for Shield of the Righteous that damages one enemy instead of a group of them, dealing significantly more damage. That's literally the only change. Number 2, we have Shield Glare, an upgrade for Avenger's Shield that deals damage in a cone whose center is your target if you have an enemy targeted. All enemies hit by Shield Glare are silenced. The third upgrade is Divine Guardian, an upgrade for Blessing of Sacrifice. All allies within 10 yards of you, except for you, take 20% reduced damage for 6 seconds. This is on a 2-minute cooldown. The fourth upgrade is Sanctification, an upgrade for Consecration that plants a beacon at your feet that sends out holy bolts at nearby enemies. Any effects that trigger when you're standing in your consecration instead trigger when you're standing close enough to the center of the source of these bolts. The fifth upgrade is Objection, an upgrade for Rebuke that is ranged and has a shorter cooldown. The sixth upgrade is Fist of the Heavens, an upgrade for Judgment that drops lightning on the target to deal light storm damage and that sends holy sparks out that heal nearby allies. The final upgrade is Light of the Protector, an upgrade for Word of Glory that you can only cast on yourself, but it heals for more depending on your missing health. Now for the thinking. First of all, a general note. Protection has quite a few ability replacing talents. And since I built these upgrade spells class by class, Paladins were the first class that I started with. Protection was therefore the first spec that I encountered that had lots of ability replacing talents. Looking at the talent grid for Protection made me realize there are going to be some dilemmas in cases where a spec has a lot of ability replacing talents. And if I thought it was bad here, just wait till I get to survival hunters. But anyway, when I run into a scenario like this, I have a few options. Number one, plan to redo the talent grids, removing the ability replacing talents from the talent grids and converting those talents into upgrades in the upgrade system, or simply avoid upgrading abilities that already have talents that replace them. I perhaps naively decided option 2 was the wiser choice. One of the main points of the whole upgrade system was that players could get cool new stuff. It would feel a bit unfair if one spec only got 4 new upgrade abilities because they had 3 existing ability replacing talents that I turned into upgrades. But it would also feel a bit unfair if one spec had 7 possible upgrades in their spread and another spec had 10, 7 new ones plus 3 old ones. If I were a developer, I'd probably go with 2 in the first expansion that has the upgrade system, and then quietly merge in the ability replacing talents into the upgrade system in the pre-patch for the next expansion after that, possibly throwing in another upgrade or 2 for the specs that don't have any ability replacing talents, just so they don't feel left out. Keep in mind that the upgrade system will be sticking around for the next expansion after that and for all future expansions. The only things that will be going away are stat increases in the trait trees. The upgrades will, for the most part, be sticking around, and there will be more of them as expansions continue to roll out. So those new upgrades that are coming in the next expansion, players are going to be thinking about those, not about the upgrades that are entering the spread in the pre-patch due to talent redesigns. I figure all of that is the most emotionally mature strategy for handling it. With that whole spiel out of the way, let's move on to the specifics. One of the things I had in an earlier draft of this was Natural Light, copied to protection from Holy and Retribution, and in retrospect, that was dumb. You can't hard cast something and avoid blocking and parrying during that cast. So Natural Light would only be useful between fights to top yourself off. That is not good enough. Though I wonder if adding the caveat that you're able to block, dodge, and parry while casting it is anything like a good idea. Obviously, that's not what I did in the first draft, and it's not what I did in this first iteration either. Instead, I revived the old pruned Light of the Protector spell from Legion in Battle for Azeroth and kept it simple. It heals you for more based on your missing health, the way the old Light of the Protector did. I hope that's okay, keeping it simple like that. Some part of me says that making things too simple is a problem, but after all the complex system Blizzard has shoved down our throats for the last 5 years, maybe too simple is the solution, not the problem. I don't know. Feedback would be appreciated on this, and in fact, on the whole thing. Sanctification is something I copied from Retribution, and it's actually an ability that Herja used in the Halls of Valor dungeon in Legion. I thought it looked amazing, and would be a perfect upgrade for Paladins. Fist of the Heavens, like Shield Glare, was imported from the Diablo series. Really, why keep it out of Paladins kits in World of Warcraft when it's such a cool ability? Since it has a small multi-target heal effect attached to it, it can be used to self-heal a little now that I think about it. At first, I had wanted to upgrade Shield of the Righteous so you can have more uptime on it. Like, you can cast it any time, it'll consume whatever holy power you happen to have when you do cast it, up to 3 at a time, but you get the increased armor regardless of how much or how little holy power you spend. But that was when I first started out, before I saw how other tanking specs generally need to build up resources in order to use their active mitigation abilities. Iron Fur, Ignore Pain, and Shield Block, those all take Rage. Deathstrike, that requires runic power, so really, if those active mitigation abilities are reasonable for those specs, then Shield of the Righteous is reasonable for Paladins. And then I wanted to cook up an upgrade that was situationally useful, that mitigated magic damage as well at the cost of some physical mitigation. I still have something like that for Guardian Druids, at least in my first iteration for them. But then I realized I could just simply do what I've done for so many other specs and so many other abilities, and just provide a trade-off where Shield of the Righteous, or rather its upgrade, hits a single target instead of multiple targets. Feedback would definitely be appreciated here. I am more than willing to tweak baseline Shield of the Righteous for things like consuming up to 3 Holy Power instead of always insisting on 3. One of the nice things about Holy Power back during Mists and Cataclysm was it could be consumed at 3 stacks, at 2, or at 1. It's a shame Blizzard forgot about that nifty perk in Shadowlands when they were unpruning Holy Power. I should probably cut in here and say that as a Holy Paladin, one of the biggest disappointments in my kit was how Shield of the Righteous, as a Holy Power spender, dealt less damage per target than my Holy Power builders. It would be a waste of a global cooldown to use it while I'm soloing, if it were on the global cooldown, but it's not, so at least Blizzard got that much right. But if Shield of the Righteous, or rather Shield of the Crusader, dealt more damage than my builders, that would be pretty sweet. So maybe I should consider moving it into Holy Spread? Or maybe save that little perk for the next expansion. Heck, I'd also have a lot of fun with Sanctification while soloing, but I gotta prioritize the healing upgrades. Anyhow, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Shield Glare is another Diablo 3 import, and I figure Avenger's Shield is the perfect use for it. It deals damage in a long-ranged cone, it still silences targets, it just has some different targeting flavor. And with this, there's a decent chance you can silence and damage even more targets than Avenger's Shield would. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing against Avenger's Shield. It was cool when it got added in the Burning Crusade, and it's been cool ever since. But I think it would be fun to be able to pull Shield Glare in from Diablo 3, and Avenger's Shield seemed like the most logical ability to upgrade to make it happen. Divine Guardian is an older spell from Cataclysm. It's an O-snap button for other melee, just not for yourself. I mean, obviously it would be useful in a 5-man dungeon where there are no melee DPS and the healer and the range don't feel like getting close. But the beauty of these upgrades is you can switch them out whenever you're out of combat. If one's useless for a given fight, it's not going to be on your spell bar, and a different upgrade will take its place instead. At first, I was going to replace Divine Protection with this, but then it seemed like Ardent Defender was replacing Divine Protection. I couldn't find any guides that said it did replace Divine Protection in so many words, though none of those guides talked about using Divine Protection. They instead talked about using Ardent Defender, so I figured, I'll just change what Divine Guardian is upgrading. I was going to add a second upgrade for Rebuke, Kaliga. That's a kick that silences an enemy if it successfully interrupts them. But after the lessons I'd learned from doing other upgrades, I decided it would be much more satisfying if I upgraded a cooldown, and Divine Guardian might have had a short run, but it wasn't bad, so back it comes. Now, the story of writing all of these is a little bit convoluted. Paladins were the first class that I came up with upgrades for, but then, once I'd written out 12 notepad files, one for each class, I decided to circle back through each of them to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Partly that's because I'd found that there were some PvP talents, or sometimes something in the talent grids that made some of my ideas not work, and I was worried I might have missed something the first time. It was also partly so I could start taking lessons learned from later upgrades and applying them to earlier files as I went. And that did make me tweak the Shield of the Crusader upgrade and take out Kaliga and put Divine Guardian in its place. It also got me to take Natural Light out of Protection's kit, what was I thinking, and replace it with Light of the Protector. But it's also making me realize that only about 4 or 5 abilities that I'm upgrading are part of your normal rotation. Maybe that's okay. And maybe it's inevitable, considering that Hammer of the Righteous is already being replaced in the talent grid. I suspect there's enough flashy stuff to get players interested, but please do let me know what you think of this first draft. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Looking at this spread of upgrades through the lens of what can a player actually use this for, active mitigation is de facto unchanged. The only thing I've changed is how many enemies you're damaging when you use your shield ability. And that might not even be useful for anything outside of soloing, though soloing is a legitimate use case as far as I'm concerned. For single target, there's Fist of the Heavens, Shield of the Crusader, and that's it. I suppose Sanctification could function as a single target upgrade since its holy bolts would get focused onto a single target. I mean, obviously there'd be a limit to how many times the same target could get nailed with a Sanctification bolt, but it could still be a legitimate upgrade. For multi-target, I've got Shield Glare, Sanctification, and again, that's it. Maybe I didn't do that great a job with this one. I could really use some feedback. Then again, maybe it's okay that only 2 upgrades in a spread actually help with a specific goal like multi-target or single-target damage. I mean, that leaves a 3rd slot free for the player to put whatever they feel like in it. Or maybe Light of the Protector is enough of a must-have in most or all situations that it's actually kind of a good thing that only 2 slots can be filled with damage upgrades. I don't know. When I've been doing this look at the upgrades through the lens of what can the player do with these step for other specs and classes, I've tended to feel more accomplished when all 3 slots are filled with something that helps. Was that the right philosophy? Or should I feel more accomplished when it's only 2 abilities, and the 3rd slot is free for whatever? Or do these 2 philosophies each have their pros and cons, meaning that either one or even both could be passable in the game in practice? Boy, do I need feedback from other players on this one. You know, I've done a lot of stream of consciousness with this, and I'm hoping I'm at least close to the right lines of thinking with this. Wouldn't surprise me if I get some feedback about this saying, there's this other track of thinking you should have been on. You totally missed it. You went 100 miles an hour down the wrong path. You saw some interesting things while you were on that wrong path, but it was still the wrong path. Now, I'll find out when the feedback starts coming. Odds are high that I'll hear that message at some point before I'm through with the first iteration, and I pretty much knew that going into this, so the sooner I hear the feedback and get onto the right track, the better. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.